And we're up to item number 11, community transport. Dave, what's the resolution that we have for this one? Just that it be received. I'm happy to move that. Mayor Toby, are you happy to second? Thank you. And I will hand over to Trudy to introduce yourself and Amantha, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Right, as Mark had mentioned before, I've taken on the secondment role of PT Manager from Andrew Wilson. A little bit of background on me. I've been in Waikato Regional Council for 8 years, of which 6 of those years have been in a project management role within PT. So delivered some fairly chunky projects over the time in conjunction with the team and working alongside Andrew. Just a couple of snippets there. The B-card RITS electronic ticketing, saw the implementation of that. Moved the total mobility scheme paper ticketing solution to an electronic solution a couple of years ago. Been amongst all of the sort of service improvement implementations, as well as some of the infrastructure actually at the Transport Centre, which involved sort of coordination and implementation of the driver facilities over the back there. And I guess finally, the sort of fare zone structure that you would all be aware of, we implemented that last July. I guess, you know, just in terms of sort of formal pieces of paper, I'm a member of the New Zealand and Australian Chartered Accountants. I've got a bachelor from Waikato University in Business Management Studies. And lastly, have a Master of Business Administration from Henley Business School in the UK, which I spent some time there before relocating 8 years ago to Waikato. So last 3 weeks has been busy for me. First day in the seat, the government had announced the 50% discount fare. So successfully rolled that out last Friday. So yes, hopefully you can see 6 months of this role is in capable hands, and look forward to, you know, being a part of the journey. So now I'd like to introduce my colleague Amantha Bowen, who's our community transport lead. Amantha, are you there?
Hi, yes, Trudy, thank you. I am here. Yeah, so I am the new community transport lead, and previously I was the total mobility coordinator. So you might be a little bit familiar with some of my work there. So I've done that for 3 years, and I've been with council for 4 years. I was part of the corporate planning team when we did the long-term plan, not the past one, or the last one, but the one before that. So a lot of familiarity with how regional council gets things done, and particularly in this public transport and disability sector. So excited to be part of this community transport initiative, and really, really excited that the decision was made to allocate that grant funding, that we're now working on the framework to be able to start to distribute it.
Thank you for that, Amantha. I hand back to Madam Chair.
Thank you, Trudy. Right, we have a question from Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Trudy and Amantha. I am a key thing that I'm interested in is just the sustainability of funding going forward. And so it's great that we're working with the sector on the eligibility criteria to make sure that I guess it's a fair playing field for applicants. But what else is happening and what else can we do in terms of ensuring a sustainable funding stream? So there's the new national health organisation that's being set up. There's Waka Kotahi. What's happening in this space?
Thank you. Look, I don't have sort of a view of that at the moment, but I can definitely come back to you with some more details. I know we've got some initial funding, as you're aware of, but yeah, in terms of sort of the strategy of continued funding, yeah, that is something that we need to work on further.
Okay. Yeah, because I think speaking with community Waikato, my understanding is a big concern is the sustainability of that funding and ensuring, I guess, that you're looking at opportunities to bring those other partners in on board. So I'd be really interested to get an update on that as we move forward. I presume this will come to us as a kind of regular update.
Yes, it will.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I look forward to that then.
Cool. Thanks for your questions. And yeah, thank you, Amantha, for introducing yourself. And we look forward to hearing back and how it went on your conversations with the sector. Yeah, so we will hear back at the next RCC meeting as to how that's gone. Councillor McPherson.
Yep. Thank you. Sort of following on from Sarah's question there, Amantha, the funding situation, I'm not sure where we are going to be able to have a discussion. You've said you don't know much about the arts, but I don't know whether Mark does, about whether Waka Kotahi's having input into this in a partnership sense. I'd like to hear that it's not just Waikato, just regional ratepayers that are funding it. It's been an issue that's been on the books for my knowledge since about 2012, I think, 11, maybe 2011, since they first had the regional community transport forum, which this regional council has been involved in. And I know that Waka Kotahi at times has gone along to that forum along with the regional council regularly. So I'd like to hear their response to that. That's one thing. Secondly, I'm a bit concerned to see, even though it's a very small amount of $1 per rateable property that's been connected as a UAGC, i.e. a flat amount charged to everyone. So a pensioner flat in Paeroa pays as much as a $5 million mansion in Tamaheri towards this. And I know we had quite a debate when we were setting up to Huia as to the best way to handle it, and we end up with a hybrid model where there was a capped charge that rose or fell with the value of the property, but it didn't go below a certain amount or above a certain amount. So, which seemed to be a sort of a compromise or hybrid situation. And my worry is it's only $1. That's not going to make much. No one's going to notice it really over a year. But if I wouldn't be keen on us or doing every sort of transport initiative funding it in that way, because then it's in this case, community transport is mostly used by people that don't have other means of transport, generally from lower socioeconomic, lower income areas. So why would they be paying why should they be paying the same as someone who can afford another form of transport? I have in my mind. So that could become a greater issue than it is with this. So I don't know how that came up. I don't recall any discussion at the Connections Committee about that method of funding. So I'd like a response on both those funding questions. But the other one was, I'm not sure what the proposals are for what would happen, what this job would involve, but one of the things that's been talked about, Amantha, you might have a comment on this, for quite a few years, is a sort of a joint booking portal, because there's quite a number of different community transport providers. And I was just in the break talking with someone that had come from a different rural council background that talked about, as well as the regional council, for non-regional council transport providers in that one town. And I can imagine the difficulty if you're two, and we've suggested for a number of years around this table, as well as in that community transport forum, that there be some sort of joint portal online that could also be accessed by phoning, a central place that you could, if you want to book something. I know Thames were looking at this at one stage, but it's come up with the Meri and Matamata community transport providers at times as well. Some way of making sure you can organise them without having them cutting across each other, or having people not knowing exactly where they should go. They just go to one place. They can find what's available at the closest time to what they need as possible, that sort of thing. So I'm not sure if we get a couple of comments, one about the revenue funding side, and one about the that particular idea.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer the questions in relation to funding. So the original recommendation from this committee was for it to be a targeted rate rather than a UAGC charge. And the council, for a couple of reasons, but one was in relation to striking of a new rate through an annual plan rather than long-term plan. It was sought to use the UAGC. You've been absolutely consistent with the logic in respect of it being, for the time being, the material impact is effectively the same because it's $1 per rateable unit, with a view to that being, with a view to that funding model being reviewed as part of the approach to funding total mobility and other things through whatever the future funding model or gathering of local share might look like, to make sure that...
So it's only a temporary arrangement at this point?
Absolutely. It's only intended to be a temporary mechanism. The other reason was that we didn't want to end up, or the council didn't want to end up in a situation where the fund, if it's a targeted rate, it goes specifically for that activity, which is absolutely fine in the longer run. In order to, might accumulate a reserve, for example. But at the moment, the actual demand for the fund is untested. The number might be too big, it might be too small. And having run the scheme for a year, we hope we'll be able to have all the other bits and pieces in place to enable the scheme to run for the better part of the year. We'll really have a better understanding of what the demand is out there, and then it can go to a targeted or whatever other model is most appropriate for it.
And Waka Kotahi, are they pitching in?
Might be a question potentially for Jessica.
Or if they run out of funds on the Wellington Road, what's it called? Transmission Gully.
No comment, councillor. Yes, so to date, we have talked about this, but it's been quite challenging. Now that Waikato Regional has taken up the role of coordinating this, we are, because as you noted, there's a number of providers, we're able to work with opportunities that exist. So yes, we are having the opportunity.
Look forward to your matching funding. And the idea of the joint sort of booking type arrangement, Amantha, any comments?
Yes, thank you for your questions. So absolutely, we're aware of the the interest in the sector to see that amount from the funding to grow, and so we will be looking into Waka Kotahi and potentially even private funding options like you might see with a trust to contribute towards that funding. The options are definitely open, and work is going to be done there. In regard to your question about a joint booking portal, we are definitely in a sort of investigatory stage right now with the sector, hearing about what their obstacles are and what what they'd like to see us kind of target first. There's been some mixed response about the notion of a joint booking portal. So with these volunteers, there's varying ages and levels of skills involved in being able to utilize applications, and some of them just really like a sort of more old school approach. So it's not to rule out the option of being able to get them all involved in a joint booking portal, but it would definitely take some workshopping and massaging it to make it something that's functional for the whole of the sector. In the meantime, they do actually have access to something that we've contributed funding towards, which is a sort of dispatch and client management system that was developed initially as a volunteer sort of donation of time and effort, initially for St. John's, and we've contributed funding to extend that application to any of the community transport providers who want to utilize it. And so there has been some uptake, but again, there's also a little bit of resistance amongst those who feel that technology is a little bit difficult for them to navigate. So there's a lot of room to grow this, and I absolutely have the interest to see whether we can get something like that out there and available to them, because it'll benefit both them and clients, of course.
Cool. Does that answer your questions, Councillor McPherson?
Well, partly.
Partly? Cool. We can come back to it. All right. As there are no further questions, it's been moved and seconded. So all those in favour, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Amantha. Thank you, Trudy. Right. Now we come to the emissions reduction working group. Verbal update from Nigel King. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. So members might be aware at the end of 2021, the Regional Transport Committee elected to establish a transport emissions reduction working group. And that was ultimately designed to give, or continue to give, specific political oversight to what we're doing to achieve transport emissions reductions, surprisingly, because it says it in the name, across the region. So this group has met a few times now, and so I must admit here, I wasn't here for the last meeting, so my apologies to the chair, but my team were. And so some of the outcomes of this work has really been, what are the actions that we're looking to do to make sure that we're driving success in this space? And I've heard very clearly from members around the table and online this morning about that desire to make significant gains in terms of reducing the emissions contributions that public transport has, and that is certainly a major and important part of the plan that is being put together. So on the back of this meeting, my team have been developing the framework for an emissions reduction plan, and we look to bring that back to the next meeting of the Transport Emissions Reduction Working Group, which is early May, I want to say the 2nd of May. And so members will continue to be updated on this as it comes through. What we're hearing very strongly is we need to understand, those matters that are of key interest to many of our councils, including what are we doing towards mode shift as a component of this funding, supporting a rural transition, and our future ambitions for the region, including the charging network, and there are a number of members I know online too that have also got an interest in this space. One of the presentations that the committee received, the working group received through that was a presentation from Professor Ralph Sims Emeritus Professor Ralph Sims from Massey University, who'd conducted a piece of research investigating a mode comparison between, using an internal combustion car, an electric car, train and a plane commuting between Palmerston North and Palmerston North and Wellington, and looking at the varying costs between those and showing under which conditions which of those modes happens to be the most carbon effective. So we do have a few key work streams that will be progressed under this or through this working group, including obviously just mentioned the development of a reduction plan, and again, members who are participating in the workshop this afternoon will hear more about the future or development of a roadmap to support electrification or carbon reduction within the Waikato PT fleet. And we've heard very, very strongly from members that we need to make sure that climate change is front and centre in our revised PT plan also. So we do have a number of key measures and actions that are being progressed, and we'll continue to bring that back through this committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank
Questions
you, Nigel.
through yourself.
Yeah, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. So thank you, Nigel. My question is around EV charging, and I think I raised this in a recent meeting, but I'm keen to understand what is actually happening in this space, because Hamilton City Council, we are going to look at whether we need to, well, we're going to be looking at options for a strategy, I guess, in Hamilton, but really we need a regional strategy. I understand there's some work that's been started, but where is that at the moment, and how can we get some visibility over it, or do we need more resourcing to get it moving along?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Your question is very timely, and Councillor Nicol at WRC has arranged for a meeting to occur this Friday, and I'm very strongly hopeful that you're a part of that meeting also, but to provide some of that guidance to find that alignment. And we recognise actually Hamilton City have already done a lot of work in that space, as have partners in Waipa. And so looking forward to those opportunities, I guess, to find where we can I guess, leverage off existing work in terms of developing that EV charging network. I can't speak to how that will integrate in terms of a PT sense, because I know there are some technical considerations that need to come in, particularly for charging of heavy vehicles in terms of the specific infrastructure requirements for that. But in terms of the wider engagement with light fleet and private fleet, we'll certainly be looking for other opportunities to make sure that we obviously work with partners, but also make sure that we're not standing in the way of good work that's already out there.
Okay, all right. Now I look forward to Friday then. So, and glad to hear that you'll be there, Nigel, and we can work through all the nuts and bolts of that then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Teague.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just it's not really a question or a comment. I think one of the things we have to watch out for in this space is the legal action taken by Lawyers for Climate Action against Auckland City relating to its RLTP, in particular its emission targets and so on. And I think that has enormous relevance to us. You'll probably know I have some opinion around how legal our own plan was. So it's just a heads up to watch out for that case. I think it's being heard this month, and not quite sure whether that decision will be deferred for a month or two, but it's certainly a space we need to watch, because I think it'll have a huge impact for us in terms of going forward and where we land for the future. So yeah, just a comment there. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Teague. All right, Councillor Teague, are you happy to move this? Oh, apologies, Councillor McPherson, didn't see your light there.
Thanks. Certainly support Dennis's comments that he's just made, and I rather think that we might, the region as a whole might be forced to beef up its response depending on what the court finds in response to that Auckland case. No secret that our council thought stronger statements ought to have been made in the regional transport area. And as far as the environment, climate change, carbon emissions, etc. go, But look, I sometimes think we miss opportunities in this committee. I'm interested in comments, Nigel or anyone, on this, that to when we're talking about the usefulness of public transport, we seem to focus on the numbers of people, the cost of it and things like that. We don't focus on the offsetting of or reduction of carbon emissions enough. We could use that argument more, I believe, than we do at the moment, and that goes for my own council, it's not targeting this council alone. In Hamilton City, over 60% of our carbon emissions come from the transport sector. So clearly it's a major issue for us, but I think it's not so high around the whole of the Waikato, but it's still, I believe it's the highest single source of carbon emissions region-wide. So the more we can do in that area, the better, and the more we can sheet home this issue to the need, or point it towards the need for public transport to help offset those carbon emissions, the better. So we should make a big point of it all the time, in my opinion. Thank you.
Yeah, good points, Councillor McPherson. I'd certainly agree that spotlight needs to be shone on emissions alongside all those other co-benefits as well. So yeah, good points. Councillor Vercoe, welcome.
It's all very well to say that we need to reduce our emissions, and Dave is saying that Hamilton City is supportive of it. I therefore ask the question of Hamilton City, if we go to electric fleet with an electric charging system, the majority of that cost will be in Hamilton City, in which case it would be the Hamilton City ratepayers that pay for it. Is Hamilton City prepared to support us in having an increase for the transport rate through our regional council rating system?
Chair Angela, can I comment on that?
Yeah, no, I'm noting that we are talking.
Just
Councillor Thompson, just noting that we are talking about this in the workshop this afternoon.
Okay.
But yes, definitely something to pick up there.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Right. Thank you. Councillor Teague, are you happy to move this motion?
Yes, I am. Thanks. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, happy to second. Thank you. All those in favour that the report be received, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. All right, we've got our second to last item, network performance update. Andy.
Hello, I'm going to spring back into life. Yeah, so I think I'm happy to take the report as read. I'd just make a couple of comments.
Are you online? You're looking. Thank you, Dave.
Some members may have noted that their agenda did not include the report for item 13. Now, we're not sure why, because some PDFs it did work and some it didn't, and it was the same PDF. Anyone in the room that requires it, I have hard copy, if that would be helpful. I can circulate that.
Pardon? Dave, did you previously send the email including the attachment? Yeah, your system is more complicated. Maybe while that's coming through, Andy, if you wouldn't mind just giving us the highlights, if there are any.
Mostly lowlights, unfortunately, I have to say. There's not those of you who attend the quarterly Hamilton focused meetings will know that our patronage is around about 30% down to prior to compared to prior to COVID at the moment. And I know there'll be quite a few questions around how much this 50% fare off is going to stimulate passenger numbers. We should see a decent amount of growth there. I'm very hesitant to put a number on it because unprecedented times with COVID and driver shortage will not have an insubstantial effect on the amount of additional patronage that we could expect. But having said that, I did get the bus into work this morning, and it was the busiest I've seen it this year. So it's, if you go by that bellwether, it's positive news.
Excellent, thank you, Andy. I also took the bus today, and it was yeah, full, with socially distanced full. And I also note when my children take the bus after school, they rush for the bus on the limited timetables, and the bus drivers are always very kind, and the bus is a chocker. So thank you. Morris.
I just had a question about Flex. I couldn't find any specific information about users from the accessibility concession, so I'm just wondering how that's going.
Through the chair, thanks, Morris. So the reason that Flex doesn't feature very heavily in this report is because it is the regional focused meeting, but I'm happy to give an update on that in the next report, if that's okay.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
All right. If there are nothing further.
I haven't had, it's just arrived, but I haven't had time to look at it, obviously, but the bus driver situation, can we get a bit more background on that, the lack of bus drivers, that is, and I seem to be commenting in an earlier report that that affected more Hamilton than anywhere else, but I might have picked that up wrongly. Mark, yeah. I think you had mentioned that at one point.
Yeah, perhaps, Madam Chair, if Andy comments on the extent to which the regional network's affected is potentially a little bit distinct to the urban network, and then I'm sure we'll have in the next item, we'll have an opportunity to dig into the issue in a little bit more depth.
Just a bit of a concern that about the figures that while you guys said you went on buses this morning which were full, which is good, we're not running as many buses because, as I understand it, because of the driver shortage. So the overall figures mightn't look as good as they could have been if we had enough drivers. And a lot of workplaces are getting their workers coming back, but it almost sounds like the drivers aren't.
So perhaps through you, Madam Chair,
what's going to be covered in the
I think perhaps, Madam Chair, that might be something that Andy could address, which would really be a question about whether or not, where you've got the view at the moment, whether or not patronage is being suppressed by reduced timetables from what it may otherwise be if we were operating a full timetable.
And I think the answer to that is it inevitably will. We run fewer services, then it's going to make it attractive to fewer people. Sometimes those services aren't just going to work for those people at all, and they'll decide not to travel or travel by other means. What I would say is that our rationale for prioritising the services the way that we have done is that we maintain the operation of the busiest services where we can, and particularly emphasising trying to get people to children to school, but also to work. But inevitably that means that we deprioritise some of the less busy services. So the early morning services and the interpeaks is where the timetable has been most substantially reduced. You're correct in picking up in the report. It does say that the regional services haven't been affected to the same extent as the Hamilton services. And the reason for that is primarily because we run far fewer services regionally than we do in Hamilton. So the driver requirement for our regional service is about 20 of the overall, I think about 160 drivers that we need to operate our timetables. Those services largely are fairly infrequent, so it means there's not an option of getting a later bus or an earlier bus, and it also means that particularly on runs such as Raglan, Cambridge, TA, Morrinsville, a lot of those trips are focused around the peaks, and they have a lot of school children travelling on them, so that's why they've been prioritised compared to some of the Hamilton services. But yes, it's absolutely having an impact on Hamilton patronage, and I think it is definitely with the 50% off is going to test the limits of what we're able to provide.
So is it COVID still causing that problem, or is it other things? The reason that I'm asking that is twofold. One, that I'm seeing the COVID peak in the Waikato come off over the last 2 weeks in other employment sectors, but it seems to be the bus driver problem is still pretty high, if not still going higher. And secondly, I can recall from about 2 months ago that we had a bus driver shortage problem even then, before Omicron hasn't really hit us at all. So I'm wondering how much of the underlying issue is Omicron versus some other issues in the sector.
Yep. I think it would be fair to say that a minor proportion of the driver shortage is caused by COVID and COVID-19 related factors, at least in the immediate term. There has been a chronic driver shortage nationally due to labour conditions, and it's the case that GoBus just have not been able to recruit faster than they've been losing drivers.
Some of the comms about that for passengers, I can recall my own problem looking online, which you would think would be up to date, and being told timetables that the experience show weren't actually operating. How much of that is updated? How live updating? You guys can't do a lot of directly about the driver shortage, but if someone sort of wants to know when the next bus is coming and they're told the time for their stop, then they sort of rely on that.
Yep. So I do recognise there is an issue currently with our app-based timetables. We're hoping to resolve that in the next few weeks. The website is up to date and correct, and we have tried to put out as much passenger communication on platforms and in the press as possible. But yeah, there is an issue currently with the app-based.
Can we not put a notice on the app with a link to the website?
My understanding is there is a notice on the app with a link to the website.
That's something that wasn't there 2 months ago. Yeah, what about the real-time displays that we do have? Are they up to date?
Similar issue.
Similar issue,
yeah.
Okay. Do we have a notice up saying this may not be correct during off-peak times? Please look at the Busset website.
I would have to check on that one. To be honest, I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer on that one.
I'm thinking, Andrew, that we're trying to get people. We're all in the same game. We're trying to get more people to use the bus, and many of them might be people that don't regularly use it.
Yep.
If you're a regular user, you will have got used to some of the changes and things that are happening. If you're an occasional user, you'll be sort of searching for information, and if that's inaccurate, we might have turned off a future user.
Yeah, point well made and received.
Thanks.
No, thank you for that, Councillor McPherson. Just on that, for those users who do use Google instead of the Transit app, is that information also being transferred to Google as well?
That's the same issue. Yeah. It's the same data source. Yeah.
All right. Right, let us receive the report. I'm happy to move. Councillor McPherson is fine to second it. Thank you. All those in favour of receiving the report, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried. Right, now we're going to move a resolution to exclude the public and move on to our last agenda item. I'm happy to move that.
Second.
Thank you. Mayor Toby to second. Thank you. All those in favour of moving into public excluded, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Carried. Right, over to you, Mark. Okay.